What does give the principle of utility, interpreted as a command, an imperative, a rule that we're supposedly obligated to follow, what gives it its sanction? What gives it its force? What gives it its authority? Well, his answer, I think, is very surprising. First of all, on page 62, he divides those sanctions, those foundations or sources of obligation, into two classes, the external and the internal. The external are the external motives for following it. And that is really, the rewards of the external rewards of following it. Like, one of the rewards is that you're good to people and they'll be good back to you. That's what he means, I think, that's an example of what he means by an external reward. Or you believe that God commands it and you want to be on the right side of God, right? But more importantly is the internal sanction. The internal sanction of duty is asking yourself, aside from any external reward for following a rule, why should I follow it? Why would I have a duty, to put it in Kantian terms, to follow it? And I think Mill's answer is quite surprising. It's completely subjective. It's a subjective feeling. He says, so far as to external sanctions, the internal sanction of duty, whatever our standard of duty may be, is one and the same, a feeling in our own mind, a pain more or less intense, attendant on violation of duty, which in properly cultivated moral natures rises in the more serious cases into shrinking from it as an impossibility. It's a subjective feeling. It just feels wrong to violate the duty, and it feels right to follow it. So that when we do violate it, we feel remorse, as he says. So he continues and says, this feeling, when disinterested and connecting itself with the pure idea of duty, and not with some particular form of it, or with any of the merely accessory circumstances, is the essence of conscience. So what is conscience? As he says here, again, I'm on page 65. This part where the reader's bracketed it. It says, its binding force, however, consists in the existence of a mass of feeling, which must be broken through in order to do what violates our standard of right, and which, if we do nevertheless violate that standard, will probably have to be encountered afterwards in the form of remorse. So a standard of conduct, a rule of conduct, has force over us when we would experience remorse, internal psychological pain or distress if we were to violate it. The kind of pain or distress that we feel like when we're a kid and we're mean to another kid and we suddenly realize when they're crying, like, what have we done? That's remorse, right? If I were to, as an adult, do something that violated the greatest happiness principle, and here he's really talking typically, I think, or what he has foremost in his mind is when I choose my own happiness selfishly over others. That is, I make myself happy at their expense, which we do, right? If I feel remorse over that afterwards, that's a sign that the greatest happiness principle has authority over me. Whatever theory we have of the nature or origin of conscience, this is what essentially constitutes it. That is, that feeling of remorse, guilt, distress upon having violated some rule of conduct. So as he says, the ultimate sanction, therefore, of all morality being a subjective feeling in our own minds. So really the question is, I suppose, how do you make the greatest happiness principle have that kind of power, that kind of, that halo, let's say, that kind of thing that's backed up or supported by subjective feeling? I mean, one of the points that he makes is that, and this is what's so surprising to me, pretty much anything can serve as a basis for conduct if it's repeated enough. This is something in Huxley's Brave New World. If you repeat something enough times, it becomes an unquestioned truth. And there is something of that here, where, as he says, unfortunately, the most perverse or wrong-headed or unfortunate principle can be made into something that is the basis of conscience, right? If he says it so well. He's such a good writer. He really is. I can't find it. But he basically he says, the most unfortunate. Let's see if I can find it. Well, I can't find it. I'm sorry. Maybe we can talk about it in the session. But he basically says that almost any standard is capable of being inculcated in people, so they have a subjective feeling that they shouldn't violate it. So why not the greatest happiness principle, right? Now, this is a psychological argument. I have to say, this is not in itself a proof that we should obey the greatest happiness principle. This is rather an argument that that people could be made to, and it is also an argument, as we'll see, that it's not unnatural. That is, that the greatest happiness principle is a natural fit to human nature. So it's not something that is perverse or unfortunate or arbitrary. It's something that we reasonably could accept and could become. He says naturally, I think, a basis for our ordinary morality.